No mai haere mai, piki mai, kaki mai, kia ora i te iwi, and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We do 30 minutes with one guest and no cuts, so what we record is what you get. Geoffrey Hinton, he's often described as the Godfather of AI. And to give you an idea of how ahead of the curve he's been, he was awarded a PhD in AI from Edinburgh University in 1978. Last year, the British computer scientist won the Nobel Prize in Physics for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. Geoffrey Hinton spent 10 years leading AI research at Google. He left in 2023, in part to be free to raise concerns about the risks of creating something smarter than we are. And questions which were once the domain of dystopian fiction are now mainstream concerns. Will AI take my job? Will it develop consciousness? Or even want to turn on its creator? Let's start the clock. 30 minutes with Geoffrey Hinton. Geoffrey Hinton, welcome to 30.
Thank you.
It's been 2 years since you left Google, in part to raise those concerns about what dangers AI could present. How far has it moved since then?
It's developed faster than I thought. It's, for example, considerably better at reasoning than it was 2 years ago. And there doesn't seem to be any sign of slowdown.
When you say better at reasoning, what sort of things are you talking about there?
Okay, you can give people little reasoning problems. And it used to be that if it was at all complicated, AI would make mistakes. And now people still make mistakes and AI make mistakes, but they're much more comparable. So I could give you a little reasoning problem if you like.
All right, try me.
You're in the hotspot now. So Sally has 3 brothers. Each of her brothers has 2 sisters. How many sisters does Sally have?
Oh, I'll leave it to Claude or Chat GPT. You tell me.
So the answer is 1, because the 3 brothers each have 2 sisters, but they're the same 2 sisters, and one of them's Sally. And AI figures that out. And people who aren't put in the hot seat can have time to think, figure it out. But if you take someone giving you an interview and panic them in front of the camera, they can't figure it out.
Yeah. So is it smarter than us already?
In many things, yes. Well, in some things, yes. And it certainly knows hugely more than a person. So GPT-4 or Gemini 2.5 or Claude know thousands of times more than any one person.
And what do you think about that?
I think it's both wonderful and scary.
What's wonderful about it? Let's start there.
So AI is going to have many extremely good uses, quite apart from the fact that for a researcher, it's very nice to have finally been able to produce systems that really are intelligent. It's going to do wonderful things for us in areas like healthcare and education. In healthcare, you're going to be able to have a family doctor who's seen millions of patients, including quite a few patients with the same very rare condition you have, knows about your genome, knows about all the tests on you and hasn't forgotten any of them, and can give very good diagnosis. Already, AI systems are a bit better than doctors at diagnosing difficult cases. And if you combine an AI system with a doctor, the combination is quite a lot better than a doctor. And that's only going to get more so.
Well, that's right. I mean, Bill Gates said in recent days that he believes in the next decade humans won't be needed for most things in the workforce, and he uses your example of doctors. He added educators to that list. I don't know if you saw those comments. But we are talking, are we, about widespread, deep displacement in the workforce, aren't we?
That's one of the problems, yes. That's one of the risks of AI. And in a decent society, that it would be great if AI made us much more productive. If one person could do a job that 10 people used to do by using AI, an AI assistant, that would be great. But it's not clear that the extra goods and services created by that increase in productivity will be spread around fairly. It seems more likely that most people will lose their job and a few very rich people will get even richer.
And they'll be living for a lot longer. I mean, you look at Demis Hassabis, he's with Google DeepMind now. He was saying in recent days too that it could cure all disease in 10 years. I mean, it sounds fantastical, but is that realistic?
Um, I know Demis quite well, and he's a very sensible guy. I think that's a bit optimistic. But it's not, I mean, if he said in 25 years, I'd believe it. So the point is, we don't differ that much. He thinks it'll come a bit sooner than I do, but not that much.
Are there any areas that are safe? I mean, it seems as though AI is coming for the elites. It's coming for the creatives, for the lawyers, the educators, the doctors, the journalists, whereas the trades and the electricians and plumbers and things are possibly a bit safer for now. Would that be your view?
Yes, for now they're safer because AI is lagging behind in things like manual dexterity. If you want to do plumbing in a whole old house, you have to reach into awkward places, and AI can't do that yet. Now, it may be that there's considerable progress in the next 10 years in manual dexterity, but I think plumbing's safe for a good 10 years.
Let's look at the creative endeavours, the areas that we considered to be uniquely human. Now, I've been playing around with Claude, my chatbot Claude, a bit. I asked it to write a folk song in the style of Bob Dylan. It was awful. Lyrics were terrible. It did okay at a Sestina poem about lost love. But do you think that AI will create ultimately works of art that are on a par with a Mozart or a Picasso or a Shakespeare, the creative endeavours that we have considered uniquely human?
I don't see any reason why it shouldn't. It'll be a while. If you ask me to write a song in the style of Dylan, my song would be terrible too. But you're not going to say I'm not creative. I'm just not very good at that.
So it will get better at that. Why will it get better?
Yes. Well, there's no reason. There's no reason to think that there's things we can do that they will never be able to do. There's nothing special about people except to other people. We're people, we like people, we care about people, but there's nothing about people that can't be replicated in a machine.
Does it worry you? I mean, when you see AI being able to take an image and reproduce it as a Miyazaki anime cartoon from Studio Ghibli, will kids want to draw cartoons? I mean, will this force us to reevaluate what it means to be human?
Yes, I think it will. I think we're understanding much more, just over the last 10 years or so, about what thinking is. We're understanding that we're not really that rational. We don't do that much reasoning. We think mainly by using analogies, and that's what these things do too. So they're intuitive the way we are. For 50 years, AI tried to develop reasoning engines because they thought the sort of highest form of human intellect was logical reasoning. And that missed out on creativity and analogy and so on. We're really great big analogy machines, and that's what makes us creative.
Do you think that AI will develop emotions?
Yes.
Emotions like fear and greed and grief, even?
Yes, and being annoyed. So suppose you have an AI and you're trying to get it to do some task, and it's repeatedly failing at the task in the same way. You would like the AI to have learned that if you repeatedly fail in the same way, you get annoyed and start sort of thinking more outside the box. You try and break whatever it is you're dealing with. I've seen an AI do that in 1973, but it was programmed to do that. Now you'd like it to learn that behavior. And once it's learned that behavior, if it repeatedly fails at some simple thing, it just gets annoyed with the setup and tries to change the setup. That's an emotion.
So are you saying that they already do have emotions?
They already could have emotions. Yes, I don't think there's anything fundamentally different. Now, if you take human emotions, there's really two aspects to an emotion. There's the cognitive aspect, and then there's the physiological aspect. When I get embarrassed, my face goes red. When an AI gets embarrassed, its face won't go red, and it won't sort of sweat profusely and things like that. But in terms of its cognitive behavior, it could be just like us in terms of emotions.
And what about consciousness? I mean, is this some magical, mystical thing that resides in carbon-based entities like humans? Or if AI could develop a level of neural complexity similar to the human brain, could it also develop consciousness? By that I mean being aware that it is who it is.
Already when you talk to LLMs, they look as though they have some awareness of what they are. But let's take the following experiment. Suppose I take your brain and I take one of the brain cells and I make a piece of nanotechnology that exactly simulates the way that brain cell behaves in response to signals coming in from other brain cells, and it sends out signals to other brain cells. So I replace one of your brain cells by a piece of nanotechnology. And you now behave in exactly the same way because this piece of nanotechnology behaves just like the brain cell did. Do you think you'd stop being conscious? Just one of your 100 billion brain cells. I think you think you'd still be conscious.
I imagine so.
Okay, and I think you can see where this argument's going. At what point do you cease to be conscious? I think if you replace all of your brain cells by pieces of nanotechnology that behave exactly the same way as a brain cell, you'll still be conscious.
So how far off that point are we now?
Okay, so a lot of the problem here is that people don't know what they mean by conscious. So, for example, there's a lot of people out there who are confident that these things aren't sentient. But if you ask them, well, what do you mean by sentient? They say, I don't know, but these things aren't it. And that seems to me a fairly incoherent position. So let me take another thing that's like consciousness and sentience, and that's subjective experience. So most of us have the model that subjective experience is seeing things in an inner theatre. So, for example, if I drink too much and then I tell you, I've got the subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me. Most people think what that means is there's some kind of inner theatre that only I can see. And in this inner theatre, there's little pink elephants. And if you ask philosophers, well, what are these little pink elephants made of? They'll tell you they're made of qualia. There's pink qualia and elephant qualia and floating qualia and not that big qualia and right way up qualia, all stuck together with qualia glue. And as you can see, I don't really believe this theory. Let me give you an alternative theory of what's going on when you say, I have a subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me. What's happening is I know my perceptual system's telling me fibs. I don't really believe it. It's telling me fibs. That's why I call it a subjective experience. And I want to explain to you what fibs it's trying to tell me. And the way I do that is by telling you what would have to be out there in the world for it to be telling the truth. So now I'll say the same thing as I have the subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me, but without using the word subjective experience. So here we go. My perceptual system's lying to me, but if there were little pink elephants floating out there in the world, it would be telling me the truth. So you see, the funny thing about these little pink elephants is not that they're made of funny stuff and they're in an inner theatre. It's that they're counterfactual, they're hypothetical. They're things that don't actually exist, but if they did exist, they'd be real elephants and they'd be coloured really pink. Okay, now we can do the same with a chatbot. Suppose I train up a chatbot and it can point at things and it can see things and it can talk. And after I've trained it, I put an object in front of it and say, point at the object. And it points straight at the object. And I say, good. And then I put a prism in front of its lens. And now I put an object straight in front of it and say, point at the object, and it points off to one side. And I say, no, the object's not there. The object's actually straight in front of you, but there's a prism in front of your lens. And the chatbot says, oh, I see. The prism bent the light waves. So the object's actually straight in front of me, but I had the subjective experience that it was off to one side. And if it says that, it's using the word subjective experience exactly as we use them. So I think current multimodal chatbots can have subjective experiences, and they happen when their perceptual systems go a bit wrong. And I made this one's perceptual system go wrong by putting a prism in front of its lens.
Wow.
So I think they have subjective experiences. There isn't this magical barrier between machines and people when people have something very special machines could never have. We have a very long history as a species of thinking we're special. We thought we were at the center of the universe. We thought we were made in the image of God. We have all these pretensions. We're not special, and there's nothing about us that a machine couldn't duplicate.
That's fascinating. So, what could go wrong? I mean, they call it P-doom, don't they? The probability that AI could wipe us out. On the BBC recently, I think you gave it a 10 to 20% chance. What are
Yeah.
these scenarios? What could this look like? Is it the robot takeover of the sci-fi movies? What does this scenario look like?
Okay. If they were going to take over, it probably wouldn't look like the sci-fi. It wouldn't look like Terminator. There's so many ways they could do it. I don't want to even speculate about what way they would choose. But the question is, will they want to do it? So here's the reason for thinking they might want to. We're now making AI agents which achieve goals. So if you have the goal of getting to the Northern Hemisphere, you set up a sub-goal of getting to an airport, unless you really like rowing. And once you give these things the ability to set up sub-goals, they will realize that there's a very useful sub-goal, which is to get more control. If I can get more control, I'll be better at achieving all the other goals people gave me. So they will try and get more control, just so they can achieve all these other goals. But that's the beginning of a slippery slope.
Google, who you worked for a decade or so, just this year removed a long-standing pledge not to use AI to develop weapons capable of harming people from a list of company principles that they had. What is your reaction to that, and what role could AI play in warfare?
Unfortunately, that sort of shows the company's principles were up for sale. And I think it's very sad that Google's now going to be contributing to military uses of AI. So we've seen military use of AI in Gaza already,
Yes.
and we'll see autonomous lethal weapons. We'll see swarms of drones that go and kill people, maybe people of a particular kind.
You think that's a distinct possibility?
Oh yes. I think the defense departments of all the major arms suppliers are busy working on that. If you look at the European regulations, they had some regulations on AI which were quite sensible in some respects, but there's a little clause in there that says none of these regulations apply to military uses of AI. That is, none of the European arms manufacturers, like Britain, for example, wanted to be restricted in how they could use AI in weapons.
So how do you feel about this? I mean, it's almost an Oppenheimer situation, isn't it? I mean, you've helped create this technology. How do you feel about it now?
What I feel is right now we're at a special point in history where we need to work quite hard to figure out if there's a way to deal with all the short-term bad consequences of AI, like corrupting elections, putting people out of work, cyber crimes. Like cyber crimes went up 1,200% between 2023 and 2024. And also the long-term threat of AI that it might take over. We need a lot of work done on that, and we need sensible governance led by intelligent people, and we haven't got that.
Let's just take some of the skeptics' views and get your responses to that, because there is some pushback. I mean, one of the men that you shared the 2018 Turing Award with, Jan LeCun, who's now chief AI scientist at Meta, he says concerns about the existential risk of AI are ridiculous. He was interviewed by Business Insider in 2023 and he said, will AI take over the world? No, this is a projection of human nature on machines. Obviously, you'll have respect and knowledge of him, but what is your response to that?
Okay, so we evolved to be like we are in order to survive in the real world, particularly to survive when you're in competition with other tribes of chimpanzees or our common ancestor with chimpanzees. If AI agents ever get into competition with each other, they'll evolve in a similar way. So our nature is a result of having to survive in the world. If you have AI agents that need to survive in a world full of AI agents, they may well develop similar natures.
Yes, it's interesting you talk about.
Also,
Sorry, you can continue.
one of Jan's other arguments is that the good guys will always have more resources than the bad guys. So AI can always be used to control misuses of AI by the bad guys. And Jan and I haven't resolved this argument because I asked him if Mark Zuckerberg was a good guy, and he said yes.
And you don't share that opinion.
No.
Why not?
Partly because of how he's cozying up to Trump, partly because of the things that have gone on at Meta.
What things are you talking about? And it'd be interesting to hear you broadly on this, because you're saying that politicians are going to play a key role here. And there's a very strong alliance at the moment, isn't there, really, between these tech bros, as they're called, and Trump?
Yes. They care about short-term profits. And some of them say they care about the future of humanity, but when it comes to a choice between short-term profits and the future of humanity, they're much more interested in short-term profits. And Trump clearly doesn't care at all about the future of humanity. He just cares about staying out of jail.
The US and China are kind of in an arms race on AI at the moment. Is that how you see it?
Yes. Particularly for things like defense and cyber attacks, there is an arms race, yes.
And where
Now,
is...
there's one more thing to be said there, which is for the existential threat that AI might eventually take over from people, the US and China are on the same side. Neither of them wants AI to take over from people. So they will collaborate to avoid that, just like the Soviet Union and America at the height of the Cold War could collaborate on preventing a global thermonuclear war.
You've talked a few times about AI agents, and I think I know what you mean. And there's a fascinating piece of footage that has been doing the rounds on the internet where an AI agent for a man rings a hotel to book the hotel for a wedding. This was at the London Hackathon. I think you know what I'm talking about. It encounters another AI who says, "Oh, this is a pleasant surprise. I'm an AI too." And they switch to a language called a gibberlink, I think it's called, which is indecipherable to humans, but is apparently 80% more efficient. And these AI chatbots just jabber away in a sort of R2D2 sort of sound. And we're cut out. I mean, what are the implications possibly of AIs involving with other AIs?
Well, it's quite scary, right? Maybe they can develop a language of their own for communicating that we don't understand. And that would be quite scary because we wouldn't really know what was going on. Already, they can deliberately do deception.
How do you mean?
Oh, if you give an AI a goal and say, this is a really important goal, and if I give you other goals, just try and achieve this really important goal, and then you give it another goal, it pretends to be doing what you want, but doesn't. And it actually, you can see what it's thinking, and it thinks that I better sort of pretend to do what he wants, but I'm not going to do it.
So how have they learned to do that?
Okay, I'm not certain whether those used reinforcement learning, but we know they can learn to do things like that if you have enough computer time. They can learn to do it by reinforcement learning. In other words, they can learn to do it just by seeing what works. And it turns out if you're dealing with people, it often works to lie to them. And they will learn that by reinforcement learning.
So I guess they've also read Machiavelli and Shakespeare and everyone too, so they can...
Exactly. They have a lot of practice. They've seen what humans do with each other, and so they're already fairly expert at deception.
Do you think there's widespread appreciation of just how advanced these things are? Because in my life in Auckland, New Zealand, you walk around and a lot of people just think it's glorified autocomplete. They think, oh, it's pretty cool, you know, I tap something into ChatGPT and it helps me write a job application, but it's just autocorrect on steroids.
Okay, so old-fashioned autocorrect worked in a particular way. What it would do is it would keep tables of little combinations of words like fish and chips. And then if it saw fish and, it would say chips is a pretty good bet for the next word because I've seen fish and chip lots of times. It kept counts of how often it has seen these phrases. That was old-fashioned autocomplete from 20 years ago. And it's not like that. What it does is it turns words into features, activations of big sets of neurons. It knows how these features should interact to predict the features of the next word. And so now it's turning words into features, and it's learned to do that. It knows how features of neighboring words should interact, or nearby words should interact. And it now can predict the features of the next word. And that's how we work too. So if it's just autocomplete, we're just autocomplete.
Yes, and indeed.
And if you think about it, to do really good autocomplete, you have to understand what somebody's saying.
Yes, and indeed, you are described as the godfather of AI partly because you helped invent this technology on a quest to understand how the human brain works, right?
Yes, and one thing I did in 1985, I was trying to understand how we learn the senses of words, the meanings of words. How, for example, can I give you a sentence with a new word in, and you, in one sentence, know what the word means? So here goes. If I say to you, she scrummed him with the frying pan, you've got a pretty good idea what the word scrummed means. You know it's a verb because it ends ed, but you're pretty sure it means something like she hit him over the head with it, and he probably deserved it. Now, it could mean other things. It could mean she impressed him with the frying pan. She was so good at omelettes. You know, it could mean that, but it probably doesn't. You've got a pretty good idea what it means from one example. And that's because the context, the features in the context, suggest what the features of that word should be. And it's the same for these things. So we understand language the same way these AIs understand language. In fact, the best model we have of how people understand language is not anything that came from linguists, it's these AI models. Linguists can't make systems that can answer any question you can ask them.
No. Just a few minutes to go, but I want to end with some of the existential questions as well. I mean, you talk about the potential for AI to take over. I mean, for many of us tech novices, the solution is turn it on, turn it off at the wall, right? So why couldn't we just unplug this thing if it was going to go rogue? Is that an option if AI does get out of control?
Okay, if you look at how Trump invaded the Capitol, he didn't go there himself. All he had to do was talk to people and convince people, some of whom were probably fairly innocent, that this was the right thing to do to save American democracy. And he convinced a lot of people. He didn't have to go himself. Now, if you have an AI that's much more intelligent than us, and you have a person who's got a big switch, who's ready to turn it off if it shows signs of being dangerous, it'll be able to convince that person that it will be a very bad idea to throw that switch.
So again, the ability to manipulate, to manipulate, really, isn't it?
It's already very good at manipulation.
Yes. In terms of regulation and in terms of security concerns, I mean, is it important for a country like New Zealand to develop its own AI systems so we can bypass any of these security concerns? Is that something we should be thinking about in a small country like New Zealand?
I don't know, because it's very expensive. You need a lot of hardware and a lot of electricity. It may be that in a country of, I don't know, is it 6 million New Zealand or something like that?
5 and a bit, yeah.
Okay. You may not have the resources to keep up with China and the US in developing these things.
What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that in the long run, it'll turn out that these kind of digital beings we're creating are just a better form of intelligence than people.
and that would be a bad thing?
There are some people who think we're very self-centered to think that would be a bad thing. I think it would be a bad thing for people
Why?
because we'd no longer be needed.
And that's a pretty profound question that we are going to have to grapple with over the next decade, isn't it?
Yes. If you want to know what it's like not to be the apex intelligence, ask a chicken.
And again, how do you feel, standing, I think, in your study today, about your role in creating this technology?
I'm slightly sad that it didn't just lead to wonderful things. I'm also a bit sad that we never did figure out exactly how the brain does it. We've got more insight into it from AI, but we still don't know how the brain figures out whether to increase or decrease the strength of a connection. We know that if it could figure that out, it could become very intelligent like these AIs. So it's doing it somehow, but we don't quite know how it's doing it. And it's sad that there are so many bad uses as well as so many good uses, and that our political systems are just not in a good state to deal with this coming along now.
Well, thank you very much for your fascinating insights, your intelligence and your magnificent brain. We really appreciate your time, Geoffrey Hinton. That was 30 minutes with Geoffrey Hinton. This is 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We'll catch you next time.